Dave, I'm just happy to be able to speak out loud today. It's probably the first time in the last week that I've been able to sustain a sentence. I have been sick as a dog. Oh. There's been a plague going through the Geiger house, and it's not been fun. It really took us out. My wife came down with it a few days ago, last Thursday. And that real sore throat, feels like you got razor blades in your throat. And then I came down with it the next day, Friday, and I could not get out of bed. Cold sweats, it was just the worst. And, when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat and you start to have like those fever dreams and fever, like your brain just starts going and you can't turn it off. You're not quite dreaming, but you're like thinking and thinking and thinking. And
where does your brain go with a fever dream? Just out of curiosity.
It's the Brad Geiger show, all me all the time. I was gonna do a appearance on another podcast called Two Geeks Talking. And I'm thinking about, I'm still thinking, I'll feel better by morning and I'll still do the show. And I was thinking about all the stories that I was going to tell, all the things I was going to say. I basically did this guy's show in my head between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Can I tell you, that's a true professional, always working, even during a fever.
And I was prepping my stories. I was getting my anecdotes ready. I'll talk about this, then I'll segue into this. I got a little joke about that. Needless to say, I woke up the next day and I was just blotto. I had to reschedule on the poor guy. But so of course, over the weekend, we're like, okay, first things first, got to take the COVID test. And both of them negative test. So we're like, well, geez, we got my wife, we're not getting a whole lot better. I'm getting a little bit better. My wife's not getting better. So the next day she goes, you know what? I'm going to call down to the family pharmacist and see if they've got a strep test. If it's strep, they could give us antibiotics. So we go walking down to the family pharmacist, about 8 blocks away or so. And it's a very day, like barely 70 degrees. That perfect.
Oh, but when you're not feeling well, though,
we're sweating rivets down our faces because we're just sick, and we've got masks on and everything. We're very careful. If there's any other way to do this without being in public, we would have done it, but we had to figure something out. So we're walking down there, and I said, you and I got whatever we got the same thing. She goes, yeah, I know. I gave it to you. I said, no, it's not about who gave it to who, but we got the same thing. She says, what's your point? I said, we only need one test. She says, Geiger, don't do this to me.
Cheapy McGee over here.
Don't do this to me. I'm like, no, but listen, it's clear we've got the same thing. We've been sleeping in the same bed for, well over 25 years now. She says, and if you'd like that arrangement to continue, you'll stop right now. I said, okay, but it's just, I'll be the one to take the test. She says, no. Don't do this to me. So we go in. I'd like 2 strep tests, please. Guy says, no problem. $50 a piece and your insurance won't cover it. I said, okay. All right.
And Brad immediately turns beet red, I bet.
I feel the hand on my forearm, just lightly squeezing. No problem. I whip out my debit card. $100, poof. We go back and we take the test, and they're both negative. Both of them negative, right? So it's like, fuck.
And I bet in your mind, no relief from the negative test. You're just like, that $100.
I could just whoosh right out the window, right? But at least I was smart enough not to say anything, because I mean, listen, there are times when being frugal with your money is smart, but there are times that you just don't. It's even smarter to not be an asshole. And even I, after 25 years of marriage, have learned not to cross that line. But we still are no closer to feeling any better. So we trudge home. And for about 72 hours, Dave, I was living on wonton soup and whiskey. It was just wontons, because it was the only things that felt good on my throat. Wonton soup feels good, and whiskey, anything the wonton doesn't touch, the whiskey takes.
My college diet. I remember it well, Brad.
It was something else. You should see what those fortune cookies said. He said your liver is not going to last much longer. But so finally, and Carolyn's not getting better. Like, I'm starting to rally, but she's not getting better. Long story short, we got her into the doctor Monday, and it was bacterial, and they got her on a amoxicillin, and she's starting to rally a little bit now. But man, this is the first time I've been able to talk for any appreciable amount of time without breaking down into coughs.
Well, you have the look of you about a man who's just so excited to be in good health. Like, you have a spring in your step and a smile on your face. Like, I know it's going to be a good show just because you're so chipper about the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be out of the house at this point. Happy to be up and eating solid food.
And for our Canadian friends and our friends overseas, the reason why Brad was upset about those strep tests is because you have to remember the American healthcare system is like Thunderdome in Mad Max, except 400 million of us enter and none of us leave. That's the American healthcare system. And on that note, friends, I'll say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We've got a news-heavy show, a lot of updates, a lot of news, a lot of things that, frankly, are impacting our industry in various ways, both online, in person, in sales, in social media. So we got a whole long laundry list of updates and bits of news that we want to talk about. But first, Brad, we've got a fun question that came in, and I think you're ready for it.
Absolutely. This one comes in from one of our Patreon backers, and actually it kind of fits in with the news theme as well, because it's about what's happening right now. This comes in from Chris, who says, with Marvel skipping Hall H at Comic-Con this year and other media companies possibly affected by the writers' strike, okay, is that going to change Dave's strategy for Comic-Con? For example, is Dave going to be bringing more books, presuming more people will be in the main hall rather than Hall H? And here's what he's talking about. Due to the writer's strike, Marvel, Netflix, Sony, HBO, and Universal are all planning on skipping Comic-Con International in San Diego this year. The writer's strike is going on. They're not getting close to signing that contract. And you know this better than I do, Dave, but what I'm reading here in Variety magazine is that if they don't sign that contract, the actors are probably going to honor that strike. They're not going to be doing promotion. And so a lot of the stuff that they would be bringing actors into Comic-Con to do, the actors might just say, we're not going to do it. So then all these companies are saying, then we're not going to show up.
Yeah, this is a really unique time because as of recording this show, we're about a week or two away from knowing whether or not the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, is also going to strike, because it might be a double 1-2 punch for the industry. Yeah. So a lot of the big players just decided, to heck with the promotional budget. With the odds that the Screen Actors Guild is going to strike and the writers are already striking, they just said, shine it, we're not going to do anything. And so my wife is in a very personal level involved with this as a TV writer. And so she's on the picket lines and such. She's writing the first play she's done in 20 years because she really can't write much right now. Right. So she's very happily writing something for the Pasadena Playhouse. But anyway, so I personally feel like that strike is going to go on. They need to have at least 1 quarter of pain. It's going to be 90 days. Yeah. They're going to have their financial results after a quarter of nothing being done. Then I think the negotiations get serious. I think it's going to take about 120, 150 days, probably about 5 months to get this thing settled. We'll see. There was a long one in our lifetime before, and I think it'll happen again, because the issues are so serious around AI and around streaming legitimately destroying the way writers used to make money. From residuals. Brad, and in fact, just before the show, we were talking about residuals, about how that used to be for TV writers a way to make up for all the lean years, where there's nothing coming in. So streaming has ruined that, and you guys can read about that separately. But anyway, Comic-Con, not going to have these big Hall H things, which in our lifetimes, Brad, didn't really exist when we first started going to Comic-Con.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
So San Diego Comic-Con had their big exhibition hall expansion, I think around I'm going to get the dates wrong, but the house numbers, you'll get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They had their extension somewhere around 2002, 2003, I think, where they built about 40% more exhibition hall on. And we all said, wow, Comic-Con's getting any bigger, all of us cartoonists, right? And at that point at Comic-Con, you still had a bunch of people with the long boxes, and you had comic shops coming, and you had a lot of artists, and you had a lot of Artist Alley. And then slowly but surely, corporate America and all the people up here in LA realized, oh, we can just drive down to San Diego. That's where all the nerds are. We're gonna sell our new movie, Iron Man. I bet they'll like it because it's based on comics, you know. So we'll get. And then they started bringing down, you know, Gandalf make an appearance. That got a huge response, and all, you know. So it builds and builds and builds, and it became this huge cultural juggernaut for a lot of people. And the thing is, Brad and I remember a day when none of that existed. You didn't need that to have Comic-Con. You still had just as happy 150,000 people without all that stuff. So just on a personal level, separate from sales, we'll get into that in a minute, I'm perfectly happy to see it back without big media companies there. I love it, frankly. How about you?
Well, I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens here. I don't have quite as much skin in the game, right? I'm going to do a signing at your table. I'm going to ship a couple of boxes of books, but I don't have a lot of skin in the game. The question that is going to be really interesting is, and Chris hit the nail on the head. Right now, Dave Kellett, are you shipping extra stock because you expect sales to go up?
The short answer is no, until this question was asked. And then I thought, maybe I'll bring 10% more. Because it's, you know me, Brad, I drive down from LA. I have my 10-year-old Honda Odyssey. I just throw it in the back. So it's not a huge skin off my nose to throw in an extra box of Pugs or an extra box of Drive or something and bring it with me.
Right.
So San Diego for me tends to be it's one of the really good sellers for me on the show. And much like Phil Folio was saying last week, I've noticed a change, but my sales continue to go up with that show and knock on wood. I don't know, Brad, that not having Hall H full will impact my sales much. What is your intuition on that? That's
why I wanted to get into this. So here's what we've got to assume. We're going to have a huge number of people who bought tickets for an event that isn't going to be there.
That's exactly what I was thinking. They pre-bought for a show that no longer exists. Yeah.
Because you cannot just show up at the door and buy a ticket. They bought these tickets months ago, right? Maybe last year, as they were walking out of last year's show, they were buying tickets for this year's show. That show is not going to be there. So now you've got to ask yourself what happens to that. Do they've got a lot of choices at that point. They could say, hey, I wasted enough money. I'm not going to go and I'm going to wander the show floor about the same amount as I was going to otherwise, but maybe I'm going to also go out and check out the San Diego Zoo, or go down to the park, or just hang out in the hotel room, or do any other number of things. In other words, that one of the ways this could break is that they just realize that the show that they bought a ticket for ain't there in terms of their perspective, and they find something else better to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not quite as optimistic as you are in general, just in terms of life outlook. In that you're more optimistic than I am in general.
Says the guy who was mad to pay for his medical test. I'm just generally not optimistic about. Yeah, keep going.
But I think like the question asker in this case is like, well, hey, all those people aren't going to be in Hall H, so therefore they're going to be in front of your table buying books. And I don't know that you can necessarily draw. I think there might be a bump in sales, But to assume that all those people that came to see the premiere of the next Marvel movie are just going to be milling about buying a whole bunch of extra stuff that they hadn't brought money to buy in the first place, I don't know that that's going to be the case.
First of all, I super agree with you. Second of all, I think two things are going to happen possibly with the people that bought a Comic-Con lottery or pre-bought last year as they're walking out. Remember, you haven't been able since 2007. You haven't been able to walk up to the door of Comic-Con and buy a ticket. This sucker sells out and probably could sell out twice over if they wanted it to, right?
Yeah.
So these people, like Brett said, bought way ahead. They bought for a show that doesn't exist. They're the kind of person, and I've never understood them, that sleep overnight to be in the line for Hall H so that they can see Loki walk out and say, season 2. And then you go, all right, I'll see it on YouTube in an hour. No big deal. I'll be honest, I've never understood that person. That person is not me. I don't know why you would do that. It seems like a tremendous waste of time, but go with God. Everybody has to live their own life.
Yes.
Anyway, those Hall H things do take about 5 to 10% of the people off the show floor. I can feel it because when the big ones let out, about 15 to 20 minutes later, the show hall is much bigger. So I think two things are going to happen. I think those kind of people who go to sleep overnight and see all the Hall H stuff, we're either going to see an uptick in resale of tickets at the door of aftermarket resale, where Scalping. Thank you. Dear God, Grandpa couldn't remember the word. I think we're going to see either an uptick in scalping, right?
Okay, I hadn't thought of that. Keep going.
Because, Brad, if you can't go sleep overnight and go see Loki say season 2, then why even go, right?
Right.
And so I think we're going to see an uptick in scalping. And then more likely, I think you're going to see much bigger crowds on the floor that never had and don't have any intention of selling or buying more stuff. Because they didn't have the money to buy, stuff anyway. Their Comic-Con was to go sleep overnight and see Loki say season 2.
But hold on, what happens? Okay, so the Type A fan, or we'll call him the Type H fan for Hall H.
Zingo!
They showed up so they could sleep on the sidewalk and watch Loki walk in. Right, your Type H fan sells their ticket. And they're scalping it out on the sidewalk. Who do they scalp it to? Well, it's not going to be another Type H fan because those people know that the show's not there, right? Do they sell it to a Type C fan who's a comics fan who's going to come in and buy a comic and look for a comic and find a comic? Yeah. Maybe. Do they sign it? But what other types are there? That might be there. Might be just a dad who's got his family that they've always wanted to go to Comic-Con but could never get the ticket. Now they've got a chance and they're looky-loos. They're just looking around, right? They're not going to spend anything. They just want to see the spectacle. That could be too. But the question is, in terms of scalping, who does that ticket get scalped to? And does that is that a general plus or a general minus for the exhibitor?
I think it all comes out in the wash because, like you said, some people, they finally get into Comic-Con by buying scalp tickets, but it's kind of like the family that gets into Disneyland, but it was so expensive to get in that no, we're not getting corn dogs. These corn dogs are $10 each. We're not getting corn dogs. And so everybody brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in with them. They're not doing anything, right? And so I think there's going to have a percentage of that.
Done trips like that.
Yes, I come from a family of 7. I've had many a peanut butter and jelly at a Disneyland. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be, I think it all comes out in the wash. We really can't say. But I guess what I'm getting down to is I don't know that it impacts my ability to sell to the 150,000 people plus or minus 10,000 more on the floor, 10,000 less on the floor. It doesn't really change. It's for those that have been listening to me for 5 years, all the stuff that I've said for pro tips on this show in terms of how to sell at a Comic-Con, I, as a single person, I'm the limiter. You know what I mean? I would need 3 more people to up the sales at my booth. I wouldn't need more people. I would need more workers. And for me to make as good a profit on San Diego, the only way I can do it is to have me and potentially Beth working the booth. You know what I mean? I'm the limiter. It's not. I could sell just as well to 90,000 people as 150,000. Does that make sense? Is that a better way to say it?
Right. Yeah. And
I'm the logjam, not the floor traffic.
Right, because you're the main event, and they don't just want to buy a book, they want to buy an experience with Dave Kellett. They want to have the sketch, they want to have the signature, they want to have the FaceTime.
I'm more talking about the salesmanship aspect of being able to find a stranger walking by, introduce them to my stuff, sell them a pug book before they go. That salesmanship requires more of a one-on-one that I can't grow that in a way that can sell more to 150,000 people. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and just so let's take the other side of that too, is that remember the early days of comics, we always said, you know, anybody that comes in, you've got to be their top five, one of their top five cartoonists before they're going to buy something from you. Right.
Yeah.
So then you got to ask yourself, are these extra people? Then it reverts to those old ways of thinking about things of, okay, they're not in Hall H, or maybe they bought a scalp ticket, but now are you one of their top five comics creators? And because if not, you're still not going to make a sale. So here's the deal. So here's what I'm hearing for you. Bottom line, are you bringing more books or not?
I mean, maybe, but I don't know that I'll bring them to the booth. I'll leave them in my car, if that makes sense. Like I might throw one more box of pugs in now, but only based on the pressure of this conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, then I would feel dumb if we had a whole podcast about it and I didn't have extra books, because I'd be like, God damn it, I did sell out. I tell you what, this is a better way to describe it to everyone. Yeah. I drive to this show. I can't emphasize that enough, that I drive from Los Angeles to San Diego. I always bring 10 to 15% more than I know I will ever sell. Yeah. Because I'm driving. Why wouldn't you throw an extra box or two in there? You'd be a jackass. It's not like I'm flying and have to ship it out. So I guess another way of saying this is I already go prepared because I'm driving. Yeah. So I can't, like, if for God willing, I sell out for the first time ever at Comic-Con, you'll not see a happier cartoonist in the world than me, because I already pre-pack an extra 10 to 15%, because I know year to year what I can sell, what I can move at a booth.
That's just it.
So, by the way, I should mention, for those that don't remember, Brad Geiger will be selling at my booth on Friday of the show. Do come by, because it has been a decade, and I'm excited for people to be able to come by and get a book from Brad Geiger and a signature and a sketch. And I've got a bunch of, Brad and I've got a bunch of Comic-Con stuff. I've got a bunch of new stuff, but do come by on Friday for the Comic-Con show, and you're not going to be disappointed. Brad's got a smile from ear to ear.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to it. But just to put a bow on this, here's what I see a lot of people on social media saying that since the Hall H is going, that Comic-Con is going to be about comics again. I think that's an overstatement. I think that's wishful thinking. Right. I'll tell you what Comic-Con is going to be about this year from the standpoint of the fans. It's going to be about disappointment. And I think we as exhibitors have to be ready for that, because again, they're coming to a show that ain't there, and that's going to be disappointment for them. It's not going to be all of a sudden that you take away all that stuff and they say, oh yeah, I remember comics. This is delightful. That's not going to happen. I really don't think that's going to happen. It's going to be more, this is the worst show because of disappointment.
Well, I apologize that you wanted to wrap up on this, because your thought there just triggered two more thoughts that I want to share.
Go ahead.
One is, do you remember how coming out of the pandemic was enough of a paradigm shift for so many of us that now something like work from home, which was impossible for 100% of businesses to even consider it, right? Now you have a lot of, especially millennials, like demanding and looking for a job that has work from home options, right? Mm-hmm. Within a matter of 4 years, that's a huge paradigm shift in how companies, and now we're about to have this huge office real estate market crash, although that's separate for all sorts of financing reasons. Anyway, I am curious to see if the big companies from Los Angeles see no difference in their bottom line from not exhibiting at Comic-Con and go, why are we spending $300,000, $400,000, $1 million on some of these exhibits to come down to Comic-Con? It clearly didn't make any difference on Loki season 2, or I know I keep going to Loki, but you know what I mean. Right. Like it made no difference to our bottom line. Why are we doing this at all? Like we don't need to spend as much. I would see that as a positive if the paradigm shift of just this year impacted further years where they reduced their spending. Because, there's that old joke about advertising that only 30% of advertising works. The problem is no one knows what 30%.
And which 30% that is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a real world test of like, did Comic-Con make any difference? No, I guess it didn't. So why are we doing this?
Or were they just doing it because they were doing it?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Because that was the thing to cover your ass. Well, the people last year did it, so I guess now I'm the VP of promotions. I guess I got to do Comic-Con,
And my competitor is doing it, so I have to do it.
Exactly. And this is a real world test where all the competitors stopped doing it for a year. Yeah. I'm sort of curious if that's a reset on Comic-Con. But to Brad's other point about now this show is about comics. Hooray, it's about comics. Yeah. I got to tell you, it's not. And I'll tell you why. The show floor hasn't been about comics. Separate from the panels, the show floor in the 23 years that I've been doing, 24 years that I've been doing Comic-Con. Geez Louise, 24 years. I'll tell you what I don't see now at Comic-Con that I did see 15 years ago. Scott Kurtz, Chris Straub, Danielle Corsetto, Meredith Grand, Jeff Jacks, all of Topatico, all of Keenspot. You have some people still going, but the prices got too high. Yep. And that's a ding on San Diego Comic-Con. For a nonprofit organization, they raised their prices too damn much. They priced out the artists that were the heart of their industry.
Right.
And I can afford it because, again, I live in Los Angeles. I drive down. I don't pay to stay. But for Brad to fly, to ship, to do all that, it became too expensive a show. It's not about comics anymore. It's about companies that sell comics adjacent stuff.
Right. And just because those companies aren't there doesn't mean it goes back to being about comics. And that's wishful thinking. It's wishful thinking, because here's the other thing about that is that those companies cultivated a new group of attendees. And those attendees came because they liked that deal. They said, yes, this is now about the companies. This is about the movie companies and the streaming services and everything about like that. And they liked that. They said, we're okay with that. You take that away, and it's not like you're left with comics people. You're left with those people, the Type H people that don't have a Type H show to go to anymore. And again, thinking that means they're going to that mill about discovering comics. They're going to mill about more than they were on the show floor before, is my prediction. But then, you know who I think is the winner in all of this? The San Diego Zoo.
You're not wrong.
Balboa Park.
Some of the best Mexican food in Southern California. That's also going to be a big winner. Yeah.
You bet your boots. I'm going to be down there a couple times getting fish tacos.
I got a couple restaurants to take you to. Yes, I'm excited for you to come out.
So I think that places, there's going to be people realizing they can get down that trolley and get out of the downtown area and explore a little bit. San Diego itself, my prediction is San Diego proper is the big winner in all this. Exhibitors like you and me, my prediction is it's up kind of pretty much the same as it was last year, which is to say it is what it is.
And listen, I will give you an honest update year to year, 2022 versus 2023, because why not? And we'll see how the numbers landed. But like Brad, I don't think it's going to be a net negative or a net positive. I think it's roughly going to be the same. And also, just wrapping it up again with the third bow as in the conversation, but there are cartoonists who get upset that San Diego became what it became, that it became a pop culture exposition and not a comic-specific show. But I got to tell you, society wanted and needed and was happily paying for tickets that became a pop culture exposition, right? That's what people wanted. At the same time that the Marvel MCU grew, Comic-Con very happily became a pop culture exposition because that's what society wanted. If you want a true comic show, there's still SPX in Maryland. There's still Dragon Con. There's still Heroes Con. There's the smaller shows that are comics focused that don't let the media companies in. You can find them. I love SPX. I just don't go because it's East Coast. And I would love to go to Dragon Con or Heroes Con if they ever invited me out. I don't think I would fly on my own. But if they invite me, sure, I'll go. But anyway, what I'm saying, Brad, is those shows exist. It's just society required something that focused on the bigger, broader pop culture impact that comics had. And so New York Comic-Con and San Diego Comic-Con filled that gap.
Absolutely. And that's okay. The world changed. Speaking as a couple of people who have been there for the change, we are all in a much better place than we were 20 years ago when comics conventions were about comics. That change did not hurt us. We just, what it means is our business is not at the convention center anymore like it used to be. I remember I used to book 12 conventions a year at one point. Now I book 0. What's the difference between then and now? Today, I'm a full-time cartoonist making most, if not all, of my money in comics. All right. In other words, those convention appearances, getting rid of those, seeing conventions change didn't hurt my business. My business turned out to be someplace else, turned out to be Patreon and Kickstarter and my own website. And comic conventions didn't factor into that. So comic conventions changing again, I don't know that it's going to be anything that I'm going to lose any sleep about.
Agreed. Yeah, as much as we, quote unquote, lost San Diego Comic-Con as a comics-focused event, the greatest single thing that we gained as cartoonists in the last 20 years is people's willingness to put a credit card into a website.
That's absolutely right.
It changed Patreon, it changed Kickstarter, it changed Shopify, it changed Big Cartel, it changed PayPal, it changed Etsy, it changed eBay. People's willingness to put a credit card into a website absolutely changed our business. And frankly, for the better. So in as much as we lost Comic-Con, we have made tremendous strides, and I think making an easier way to make a living online.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Dave, I've got a new sponsor to introduce you to this week, and I'm really thrilled with them. You've heard me talk about them before. It's DriveThruComics. That's DRIVE. Through is THRU, and then comics, COMICS.com, DriveThruComics.com. We talked about these folks a little while ago when one of the other digital ebook sellers kind of had some problems with NFTs and had a real bad implosion. And I said, well, thank goodness I'm still doing business with DriveThruComics because I have really brisk ebook and e-comic sales over there. And I just ended up, honest to goodness, I stopped offering e-comics and ebooks at any other place. And I just focused all of my attention on DriveThruComics. And I've been having really great results. So I was absolutely tickled when they reached out and asked about sponsoring this episode. So I could take a couple seconds and just remind you that they're there. Right? They have they accept NSFW content, which is a big one for me. And they're a really solid supporter of the independent comics community.
Well, that's what I was going to say about DriveThruComics.com is that not only is Brad Geiger there, but it's kind of a who's who of folks who know the value of an independent comics career. Yeah. So you got Gail Simone, you've got Phil Folio, you've got Hellboy. I mean, the list goes on. And so I think that speaks volumes to folks that want a really valuable, trusted outlet to get their independent comics and to make a good profit out of them in a way that everyone, both reader and artist, are happy with.
Absolutely. And I found it very, very easy to upload my stuff there and to get, I can publish an ebook at this point in about 5 minutes. I can just bink, 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 bink. And then once you've done one, you can roll over those settings onto another one. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time. And they've got a really kind of a robust system of internal advertising you can set up promotions for your book that end up displaying on the site as internal advertisements. And I actually get really decent click-through rate. I get real decent bounce off of that in terms of people discovering things and bouncing right over to my category page and buying a bunch of stuff. They have a bunch of sister sites like DriveThruRPG. And if your comic has kind of an RPG or a Dungeons and Dragons kind of a feel to it, fantasy particular, there's a real strong crossover among all of those sister sites that people come bouncing around. I'm using bounce a lot, but there's a lot of bouncing going on at
Brad's got a lot of energy about DriveThruComics.com.
But I see, in fact, what I ended up doing, and DriveThru reached out to me in the very, very early days and said, "Hey, Brad, put together a source book of Evil Inc. characters." And I'm like, what's that? They say, well, imagine if somebody were going to play an RPG using your characters. What information would they need to know to create stats? Like, how much can Captain Heroic lift? Remember the old handbook of the Marvel Universe,
yes.
all the stuff that, well, they go, make it agnostic, he said. And what that meant was, don't use D&D stuff, right? Just you can't use their stuff, but give them the information that they would need to create those stats, and then call it a source book and put it up there. He goes, just watch how it sells. Dave, it's been one of my consistent sellers for years. It was nowhere near on my radar. They literally reached out to me and said, hey, you should think about this. I've been selling those books ever since.
I never would have thought of that. That's such a brilliant idea on their part to pitch to you. And I'm so glad you did it. That's great.
Yeah.
And was it? Now I kind of want to see it. I don't know that I've ever seen this thing from you. That's a brilliant idea.
It's pre-reboot, as a matter of fact. But I've got so many ancillary characters. I actually I'm overdue from going through and doing another set. But one thing's for sure is that I've found nothing but great opportunities over at DriveThruComics.com, and I'm super thrilled that they're sponsoring today's show.
Absolutely. And so once again, that's DriveThruComics, and through is spelled THRU. So DriveThruComics.com.
All right, Dave, we've got a bunch of updates now. And in fact, we're probably going to fill out the show with nothing but updates. These are all either stuff that's happening in the news right now, news events that we've talked about in the past that we have an update on. And the first one, which I'm sure is going to, the first update that I'm going to give you, and before I get into the disappointing one. I'm laughing
before you even get to it, because I know we're going to get some messages.
I'll tell you what, before we get to the disappointing one, let me get you to the one that's going to absolutely have you thrilled, because we just got done talking about SDCC, San Diego Comic-Con. Dave, tell them the first update about San Diego Comic-Con.
I already told you that for the first time in 10 years, the wonderfully handsome Brad Geiger is going to come out to San Diego. So you already know to come by the booth 1228 on Friday to get a signature and a book and a sketch from Brad Geiger. You already know that part. But I got to tell you, Saturday night, 8 to 9 p.m., we are doing a Comic Lab live for the first time ever at San Diego Comic-Con. I hope you come out and join us. We're going to have a tremendous time. I bet you I can get Brad to enjoy a nice little tequila before the show at one of the fine Mexican restaurants across the street, so that Brad is suitably enjoyable. I don't know why I'm making it so that you need it to be enjoyable. Never mind. I'm going to strike that whole thing.
Him ready to be around people. If he's sufficiently drunk, he'll be okay, folks.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get Dave a burrito and Brad some tequila, and we're gonna be good to go for. But anyway, 8 to 9 o'clock, San Diego Comic-Con. Be there Saturday Night Live. It's going to be a great time.
Absolutely. So now that we're on this other side of the happy stuff, let's start with our first update. And as you might have guessed, it's about Mastodon. And I know you folks think I'm harping on Mastodon, but I'm really, really concerned. I've been doing a lot of A/B testing because we've heard from people saying, I don't like it when you pick on Mastodon. And I always, in the back of my mind, I'm always like, well, am I right? Am I being a jerk? So I wanted to kind of test some stuff out. So I've been testing the same post on Mastodon, BlueSky, Twitter, of course, and Pillow Fort. Hive, I've got a account at Hive. Every time I open it up, I look at it and I'm like, I just don't have the energy, and then I close it again. So maybe I'll find some energy to start experimenting with Hive again. But the three main ones I've been testing are BlueSky, Mastodon, and Pillow Fort. And so I've been opening Mastodon a lot. The other day I open up Mastodon and I get this message from the person that owns the Mastodon instance that I'm being hosted on. Now, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was going to say instance correct me if I'm wrong. Instance is basically another way of saying, hey, a hosted server, right? This is we've put this version of Mastodon in the federated universe of Mastodon, but this chunk of Mastodon lives on this server, right?
Right. And that's when you hear people with the criticism that Mastodon is siloed. This is what they're talking about. Okay. And it's a fair criticism in that you are in a Mastodon instance. It's almost like being in a Discord server, right? You can freely talk with everybody in your server. Getting outside of that is a little bit more tricky, and I actually plan on talking about that in a couple seconds. But yes, each of us had to sign in to a Mastodon instance, into a Mastodon server. And that's our little silo that we exist in. Okay, so the person that owns mine had a message just the other day that said, hey, everybody, due to our growth, I've had to bump up our hosting plan a notch. So it's now $110 a month US. If you'd like to contribute it to help, you can do so at our Ko-Fi page at blah, blah, blah. Thank you. And I realized right there, Mastodon ain't it, you guys. If here's the problem with that. If these are each hosted by individuals, those hosting costs are going to start to rise as that Mastodon instance gets more and more popular, and you're going to be relying on one person to cover all those fees. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, no, I'm gonna send some money to this person. I'm gonna sign up for this person's Patreon, or I'm gonna sign up for their Ko-Fi, and I'm gonna kick in for my server fees. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat that you're a good person. Your heart is absolutely in the wrong place, in the right place. Sorry,
what a Freudian slip.
Yeah, no kidding. But the place that you're in the wrong place is this. You're also in the minority. You're in the minority. Most people are going to not contribute to this social media because they're not used to paying for social media for years and years. And also, it's just human nature. Why pay for something when you're getting it for free? So these instances are going to start to crumble. You're going to build. Remember how we always say you only build your castle on your own sand? These things are built on shifting sands now, because in the future, as these things get too big, they're going to crumble. You're going to have to build anew on somebody else's Mastodon instance until that becomes too big. You see where this is going. As these people are covering their own hosting fees, pretty soon they're going to be tired of footing the bill for everybody else's social media, and they're going to get out of the game. Because stop and think, would you today spend $110 a month to host a social media for a whole bunch of strangers? The answer is no. And if the answer is yes, well, we'll come around to what happens if the answer is yes, because I know some of you think that this is the equivalent to owning and controlling your own work. You couldn't be more wrong, because we're talking about social media, but you think that this is owning and controlling your own work. We're going to come around to that in a couple minutes, Dave. Help me remember to circle around back to that. But my first concern is that these servers are going to start to crumble as people get sick and tired of paying for everybody else's social media.
Yeah, and the counter argument, like Brad, all good wishes to the people that do want to all chip in with other strangers and support this instance. That's great. That speaks to the better nature of humans sometimes. I think that's great. And they might point to the success of Wikipedia or Craigslist in the sort of semi-crowdsourcing of the cost of Wikipedia, or in Craigslist's case, that's a little different. That's kind of advertising by companies. I think job listings pay for everything else.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm going, which is a small number of people helping to keep a web thing going by just a small trickle of money, compared to a big corporate effort. And so the heart is there. But I think, unlike Wikipedia, instances being distributed, it's just a harder nut to crack to keep that up and moving and going, in the sense that, let's say Greg runs the instance for us, Brad. He's got a server, or he's paying on AWS, and he's got his instance going. Okay, but you know what? Greg is falling apart from his divorce. Okay, now our instance is falling apart. Oh, Greg decided to take that job working for the National Park Service, and he's out of server range now. And who's going to take over the? You know what I mean? It just, everything is small ball, and it can fall apart really easy. Is what I'm getting at.
Yep.
It feels a little bit like a shitty condo HOA, is that like a bunch of weird personalities could ruin the whole thing of your instance,
Yep.
Which is not what I want in my social media. I want to get on, I want to have it work. I want there to not be terrible human beings. And I want it to have not weird rules. And I want to be able to share with my readers and talk directly. And frankly, I don't want to pay anything, is the honest to God truth.
Yeah, because it's social media. You don't want to pay anything. Oh, and by the way, let's say you are Greg and you bought that Mastodon instance. You're also legally responsible for the things that get posted on your server. So what happens if somebody comes in and posts something that is reprehensible or illegal?
Or leads to a death, or, exactly.
The legal responsibility, under my understanding, and I've been, like I said, I feel it necessary to do as much kind of looking into this as I can. So my understanding, based on what I'm seeing in a lot of what I consider to be trustworthy sources, is that you are legally responsible for moderating the content and safeguarding those people that are on your site.
To clarify, you're saying if you're one of the people that contribute money, that you're in part
no.
liable?
If you own the Mastodon instance, if you're the person, like if you're a contributor, then not at all. But if you're the person that owns that instance, and that goes back to the own and control, because I've heard people saying, Brad, you should own and control your own social media. And then that means you get your own Mastodon instance and you control everything that goes there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I do think, just as a counter argument, Google and Yahoo and Facebook have legally put a little bit more wiggle room around that, because they don't want to be responsible for anything. So they've kind of plowed that road for everybody else. But I take your meaning that there is danger there, especially in America, where someone can sue for anything. Yes, I get where you're going with that. Well, now let's switch gears. This was a little bit further on our topic list, but let's bring BlueSky up into this, because I've been using BlueSky, which again is in part a federated instances, but it has a skein of unity over it, which I found as a first time signing up for Mastodon versus signing up for BlueSky, it was easier. And I got to tell you, anytime you can remove a hurdle to someone saying yes to a thing, it just makes it more likely that they're going to do it, right? And so BlueSky took 2 hurdles away that Mastodon required and made it just 10% easier to sign up. And I think that will make the difference. However, you had a funny thought, Brad, about both BlueSky and Mastodon, and I wanted to bring that onto the show. I
have been doing a lot of A/B testing, and it's been fascinating because again, social media is social. So in doing this, I'm also taking a lot of time, not just to post, but to read what other people's posting, see how people interact and everything. So I can try to speak intelligently about all these platforms, and also so I can make an intelligent choice for myself. BlueSky has been fascinating, because BlueSky conversation is like, those movies where somebody has a first date with another person that just got divorced or just had a big breakup, and all that person can talk about is their ex. That's BlueSky. BlueSky is awash with people who can't talk about anything other than Twitter.
Every
had a
third post,
big
you're right.
breakup
Every
with
third
their
post on
ex.
BlueSky is about how this is better than Twitter and it's not Twitter. And thank God we're not Twitter. And look what's happening over on Twitter.
If you can't, if you have a topic that's not about how this is so much better than Twitter, BlueSky doesn't want to hear it. All they're talking about is Twitter. I'm trying to talk about comics, and they're like,
you're right.
what,
That's funny.
This has nothing to do with Twitter and how much better it is here than Twitter and how much we hate Twitter. And it's all up. BlueSky is all about people talking about their ex.
And I got to tell you, Brad's metaphor of the divorcee or divorcee, I never know how to say that, but that's perfect because will this fade in time with BlueSky? Yes. Eventually, the people like a divorcee will learn how to get back to being themselves again and post about things of interest. But you're right that for the first couple of weeks that someone gets on BlueSky, they're like, thank God I'm not on Twitter anymore. Oh boy, remember all the terrible people on Twitter? Twitter. Yeah. And you're like, just start talking again. You know. But anyway, I personally. So far, again, I will kind of commit to this. I think I'm going to call my horse on this race, and I think BlueSky might be the one to win. I genuinely think. But before we move on, though, what do everybody on Mastodon talk about, unlike BlueSky?
Mastodon. Okay, I don't know. I don't know enough people who are vegans to know whether this. It sounds like it's probably an unfair stereotype. Most stereotypes are, but the unfair stereotype about vegans, about all they can talk about is being a vegan, and it's all vegetables all the time. And again, I all I know is that that's the unfair stereotype. I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's Mastodon. All Mastodon can talk about is Mastodon. Mastodon's talking about how great Mastodon is. Mastodon is good because this. Mastodon is great because this. One thing you don't know about Mastodon is this other thing. Meanwhile, again, I'm trying to talk about comics, and I'm getting nowhere because I'm not talking about how great it's not to be on Mastodon. Mastodon is all about Mastodon. Oh, they're so fascinated with Mastodon. It's really almost cultish. The devotion to Mastodon.
Can I interrupt the Mastodon and BlueSky conversation to share a quick story with you that's funny? You know that famous tropey scene in cowboy westerns where someone swings open the doors of the saloon and the piano stops and everybody turns and somebody like spits out their chaw and they're like, oh hell, here it goes, right? I want you to imagine that moment when I described the story to you. So I went out to Sideshow Collectibles. You guys probably know them from Comic-Con and from the internet. They are makers of beautiful maquettes and like 1/64th models and 1/32nd models and 1/16 models. I have a Darth Vader on my desk that they gave me. Anyway, they invited me out. I did a show that they were streaming from there. Got a tour of their plant and their creativity was amazing. But then they said, do you want to have lunch here? We have a vegan cafeteria. And I said, I've never had vegan before. Sure, let's try it. And I guess one or both of the company owners are big vegans. And so I guess part of owning a company and being a vegan is that you then make all your employees eat vegan too. But anyway, so I had a perfectly lovely meal of vegan food, but it had these mashed potatoes that were particularly amazing. At one point I go, God, you know what would be amazing with these mashed potatoes is a really good steak. And it was like that moment in the Western where the guy walks in, because everybody stopped talking about, hey now, come on, slow down with that steak talk over there.
Oh my God. Yeah, because what's mashed potatoes without gravy? What did you put on those mashed potatoes? Butter.
There's a certain I can't describe this unless you've ever had it, but there's a certain kind of mashed potatoes that it just goes perfectly with steak. Like you can't imagine you want to put a little bit of steak and a little bit of mashed potato on the same bite, and you're it's golden. Oh. I made that comment, and the chef was like, "How dare you!" Anyway, so. So to put a button on this, perhaps, I agree with Brad that Mastodon is it. I a little bit think that Twitter's going to, BlueSky's going to win the race of Twitter falling apart. But even there, it's not a huge return on anything yet. Both Brad and I would say, just from a purely smart perspective, don't go all in yet on anything. Nothing's really won the race yet, and frankly, there still might be an 800-pound gorilla that comes into the race a month from now if Google figures out something or Facebook. I mean, Facebook has already announced something, but both BlueSky and Mastodon are interesting to keep an eye on. BlueSky maybe a little bit more so. Don't go all in yet.
Yeah, and Facebook's thing is through Instagram, right?
Right.
That's the one I've got my eye on. Yeah. So that's going to be something we got to keep on our radar too. And I mentioned Pillow Fort. And there's a reason that I only mentioned Pillow Fort once. I like them. I think they're great, but I'm not expecting big things out of Pillow Fort either.
I never know what to make of the name Pillow Fort, by the way, Brad. I hear that name and I'm like, is that some weird site to like, I don't know what I'm getting into here. Like the name Pillow Fort, I don't know why it just it just sounds like something skeevy to me. I don't know why.
it sets out your red flags. Well, listen, we'll put a button on that. We'll talk about, I've got more to say on these, as particularly I've got more thoughts to share on Mastodon, but we're not going to beat them up for too much longer today. Let's switch over to Patreon because we've got a news update on Patreon.
Yes.
And this is one, Drew. Do you remember I made a prediction, I think during our prediction show, that Patreon was going to start to try and scoot people like you and me off of the founders level, because the founders level, we had gotten kind of a sweetheart deal since we were early adapters, that we have a really good percentage breakdown on our Patreon funds, right? When we process the payouts, we've got a really favorable percentage. And as they try to improve their profitability, their job now is to get us slowly to coax us off of that founders level. And I said what they're going to do is they're going to start to offer things like hosted video, which they did. That is going to be for people at those other levels, but not the founders levels. And that actually happened. They released early video and hosted video, but it was not for the founders level until they made an update just recently where they said that congratulations, said the email, because you're subscribed to the Patreon Founders Plan, you are invited to join Patreon Video Early Access. So you can have this same Patreon video hosting. Sounds great, right, Dave?
Exciting, right? Yeah.
Except that, wait a minute. I guess the email kept going. Your early access runs through 2023 and comes with the ability to post up to 100 hours of video, which is on average about a year's worth of content. Please note that your plan is subject to change at any time. In other words, what they want to do now is get people like you and me to start using this, fall in love with it, which is fair. It's a good feature for people who need video. And then in 6 months at the end of the year, then it's going to be, hey, if you want to keep using this, guess what? Just like Brad predicted, you're going to have to come off that founders level. I don't know that that's a fact, but that's my prediction that once they get you into this, then they're going to use it to separate you from the founders level.
I will 100% co-sign with Brad that all my Spidey senses tell me that's exactly what this is going to be. Because why would you time limit it for founders? That seems very weird. Right. In fact, I'll go one step further. I haven't started the initiation process, but I bet you, again, I don't know this for a fact, but I bet you if I walk down the path of doing this video hosted on Patreon system, that by even trying it, I might be bumping myself out of the founders level. I might have to accept that my rates will go up in 6 months when this ends, this trial period ends.
Yeah, so you're not even going to touch it out of like that.
Well, I'm not going to touch it because I don't need video in general. Right. Like it works perfectly fine for me to link to a YouTube video or Vimeo video from my Patreon. But I will say that this whole thing, there is eventually going to be a killer app or a killer, implementation of something that's going to get us off the founders level. But it's got to be something that replaces thousands of dollars of income. Because if I jump up from what rate are we paying at the founders level? Oh gosh, I don't know off the top of my head. Okay, well, darn it, it's near double for the next tier of what we get at founders level for the pro level. Yeah. So for me, that I would have to be gaining so much more in new, additional, fresh income to replace the lost income just in jumping out of the founders level. And again, I know this is talking only to the old school grandfathered people that are still in the Patreon system founders levels, but it gets, I just saying from a business perspective, like Brad, I have every suspicion that they rightfully as a business are trying to walk us up the ladder, and that this is going to be what this video on demand is for founders down the line.
Yeah, and by the way, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, they're going to need to do that. Eventually, they're gonna pop us off, and they're going to find something that makes it worth it. The only good thing about being a comics artist on Patreon is that most of their income comes from like podcasts and video.
Boy, it sure does, doesn't it?
Right. Or and audio creators. That's their big meat and potatoes. And you can also argue NSFW fits pretty prominently in all of that. But most of those creators are using video and audio, which means on the downside, they're not putting a whole lot of thought, like Dave and I have talked about in the past. They're not putting a whole lot of thought into how they're presenting stuff on Patreon for comics artists, for example. Right. And in fact, I think their next update is going to actually make the visual presentation of comics work much less good than it is right now. In other words, the next update, from what I saw a preview of it, is going to be a step in the wrong direction for comics artists. So that's on the negative side. But on the positive side is that we're going to be the last people that they develop something that's going to scrape us off that founders level. They're putting think about it, they're putting all their energy into stuff that's going to get the video people off the founders level, right? Because that's where they get the most bang for their buck.
That's where the money is.
They're going to get the podcasts off the founders level. They're going to get the music artists off the founders level. They're not going to get around to worrying about whether the comics artists are on founders level for another several years.
Yeah, so just a reminder that it all balances out in the wash. We lost Comic-Con to the big media companies because we're the stepchild of the arts. But with Patreon, because we're the stepchild of the arts, we're kind of forgotten and in the backwaters. And so no one develops any killer apps for us that moves us up to off the founder plan. Right. So yes, I agree.
It's good to stay under the radar.
It is.
That's been my life story. Stay under the radar. Hey, but there's one thing that's honest to goodness, you've got to be above the radar. And that is when you've done an hour show, you got to know when it's done. And that's my job, is to say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend, the delightful Brad Geiger, who will also be talking at the NCS Fest at New Jersey this year. So if you are going to be out at the NCS Rubin Awards, for which Brad is also a rightful nominee, you're going to want to see Brad talking at a Comic Lab live panel with Sarah Anderson of Sarah Scribbles will be our featured guest, along with the NCS president and cartoonist par excellence, Jason Chatfield. So you're going to want to, if you're in the NCS and you're going to be in New Jersey for Rubens Weekend, you're going to want to check out the Comic Lab live podcast recorded at NCS Fest. And you're also going to want to know that Brad is the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, who is also nominated for an NCS award in long-form online comics, and is also going to be doing a live talk along with Sarah Anderson and Jason Chatfield. And my God, is that going to be a great weekend. We're going to have a fantastic time. Make sure you come out and see Dave at his best at NCS. A rare East Coast appearance for the lad.
That's right. It's been many a moon since I've made my way to the East Coast, Brad.
So then we're going to have a lot of fun. And we're going to get to see Dave go up there and get his award. It's going to be a very, very good time had by all.
Well, and the only reason I would be getting the reward is because Brad tripped and fell on his way up to the podium in receiving his award. So I, as a friend, had to go up while they were carting him to the hospital and say, I accept this award on Brad's behalf, and I'll give you guys updates as we hear about how he's doing at the hospital in New Jersey.
That's right, as long as they don't have to administer a strep test. And Kellett is also the co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
Brad at the hospital just continuously waving off services. No.
That's
How much does that cost? No, I don't need that blood transfusion.
How much is that aspirin? I brought my own aspirin. It's got my name on it.
I've got my own snake oil here. And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Spotify, where we are burning up the podcast charts.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/don't take the penicillin. That's where they make their money. Everyone just ask for a generic. You don't want the penicillin. That they pad that with the profits. Come on, kids. We're leaving this hospital. Get in the Geiger Mobile. We're going
Hand
home.
me the duffel bag. I got some ginger ale in there. You'll feel better in a couple minutes.
Look, I went outside and I scraped some bark off an ash tree. We're going to make our own aspirin. Speaking of scraping the bark off an ash tree to make aspirin, I was reading Ryan North's excellent book where you travel back in time, but you have to rebuild society.
Oh, yeah.
And page after page after page, Ryan has told you how you reinvent medicines, how you reinvent electricity, how you get indoor plumbing working, how you get a car going, how you figure out astronomy, right? And it's just page after page of stuff. I'm like, oh, I'd be dead. I'd be dead within 30 seconds of traveling back in time.
I would find a way to give myself such a paper cut from the book that I just die. I just bleed out. I'd be the one guy that just bleeds out reading the book.
I need Ryan to write a page on page 1 that's just like how not to accidentally drop this book into water and ruin the whole thing. You know, like I would make a mess of it just within seconds of traveling back in time.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not a survivalist. I'm a casualty.
Imagine a guy too coming at you with a sword and you're like, hold on, page 49, how to defend against a sword. Oh God.
It better be a thick book. It's gonna have to block the sword.